Tony D and Little Joan somewhere in the house, and this is kind of a legend of the Pines. Doing some research into Betsy Ross for the next book. I know I'm not going to tell you what it's about, but I'll tell you Betsy Ross has somehow got a connection to it. Smash like and subscribe. Thank you for smash liking and subscribing. Check out my books. The links are in the description. Comedy horror in South Jersey. It's the Pineys, books 1 through 16. Available at Amazon.com. Don't forget, Kindle Unlimited is free. Why am I doing research on Betsy Ross, a figure in the American Revolution? Well, she was from South Jersey. She was from Gloucester City. And some fascinating facts about her, even in just skimming it over in Wikipedia and other places. She is famous for making the original American flag. But and the story goes, George Ross, who signed the Declaration of Independence, and George Washington, and I forget the other guy, um, went to her and said, "Hey, can you make this flag?" And Washington apparently wanted the stars to have 6 points, but Betsy, being an upholsterer and sort of more of a design person, said, "Oh, no, 5 is going to be better." And she took her scissors and she made a 5-pointed star and said, "Here." So that's kind of interesting. I didn't know that. But she was one of 17 children, if you can imagine, 17 children. And only 8 survived in the childhood. She was one of 8 that survived. Because that's the way it was. This is the 1700s, keep in mind, before the American Revolution. And she was married 3 times. 3 times, which, again, that's pretty crazy for that era, I think. So as her first husband had the last name Ross. I believe he was the nephew. Yeah, he was the nephew of George Ross, the guy who would sign the Declaration of Independence and would eventually be part of the 3 who asked her to make the flag. And it gets a little better. She eloped with him. Now, she was a Quaker, and so that was kind of a little bit controversial, her eloping with him. So she had to split from the Quaker congregation over that. I guess Ross was not a Quaker, and so I thought that indicated to me Betsy was kind of very strong-headed. And in fact, during the American Revolution, she had the nickname Little Rebel. A British soldier during the occupation of Philadelphia nicknamed her Little Rebel because she was arguing for the colonists. So I thought that was cool. She had a cool nickname. So anyway, she married Ross and they started an upholstery business, and then eventually they did the American flag. But then her husband was signed up in the American Revolution and he was killed. It's terrible. She eventually married, during the war, married another man whose last name was Ashburn. And then he was in the war too. He was a sailor, mariner. He got caught, got thrown into prison in England, and died in prison during the war. Now, he had a friend named Claypool that he met in the prison. And after he died, Claypool came back to America after he was released from the same English prison. And he informed Betsy of Ashburn's death. And then she married him. So that was her third husband, Claypool. So by the end of the war, basically, she had burned through 3 husbands. And then she stayed married to him, basically, and had some kids with him. I think she had kids with at least 2 of them, I believe. And she had I think 4 or 5 kids. I don't remember. But the big controversy over at the Betsy Ross house, which is in Philadelphia, was, did she make the flag at all? So here on their website, they provide some evidence that yes, she did. Now, some people say that her grandson, William Canby, sort of exaggerated the story a bit because it was coming up on the 100th anniversary of America, and they were trying to tout Betsy Ross as the girl's American patriot, and that they may have exaggerated it somewhat. So, but here's some of the points. Now, George Ross was a member of the Flag Committee in the Continental Congress, and that's one reason they cite that she would be picked to make the flag, because they would have kept it in the family, you know, nepotism. So that's the most obvious thing. And then in Mount Vernon, where Washington lived, they discovered documents that showed that Betsy and John Ross made the bed hangings for George Washington in 1774, which again makes sense because they were friends. And Betsy met Washington in their church before he was a general. He was still a colonel, which was kind of cool. So they were buddies. It was common for upholsterers, I'm reading from the site, to take up other forms of work during wartime. And Betsy did make uniforms and had government contracts. So, again, nepotism, tents, uniforms, and whatnot. On May 29th, 1777, reading from the site, Betsy Ross was paid a large sum of money from the Pennsylvania State Navy Board for making flags, and on June 14th, 1777, Congress adopted the Stars and Stripes as our official national flag. So, they say, coincidence? She continued to make flags for over 50 years. Again, government contracts. And many receipts exist for her work in the first 2 decades of the 19th century. For example, in 1811, Betsy made over 50 garrison flags for the U.S. Arsenal on the Schuylkill River. Now, I would push back on that a little bit and say that doesn't necessarily mean that she made a flag. At that point, she would have probably been pretty high up in Philadelphia society and running a business. So, she, you know, it's just like anything else. Somebody who's got a name and a reputation, they're going to want their flags made by the best, or made by Betsy Ross. They're going to want to brag to their friends, oh, we had our flags made by Betsy Ross. Really? Like that kind of thing. But still, I could see why they would include that. And in the 18th century, flags were not revered as they are today. The flag had not become a symbol of liberty or patriotism yet. It was more frequently regarded as a military tool like a tent or a uniform. Betsy Ross told her children and grandchildren the legendary story not because she had made the first flag, which was probably somewhat insignificant in her mind, but because General George Washington, a great man who would later become the first president of the United States, visited her home and asked her to make something for him. So, that seems legit. That seems legit. I think she did. But yeah, I mean, it was probably not a big deal to her or anyone else. It was more like, well, we need a flag. But I felt Betsy was kind of an interesting character. And she's from South Jersey, Gloucester City. So I thought that was a cool South Jersey thing. I don't know what I'll call this segment. I think she's kind of a legend of the Pines. I mean, Gloucester City would have been, you know, pretty rural at that time. Really, the whole state was. You know, a bunch of villages, sure, but mostly farms. Mostly farms and a couple of buildings here and there. A couple of, you know, farm buildings and stuff. would have been pretty Piney still. I think she would have known the story of the Jersey Devil. 100%. Anyhow, that's it for me, Tony D, and Little Joan somewhere in the house. I'll be back later today with a live stream. Do you know what a live stream is? I think you do. It's the Hollywoke Hot Take Live. We do it at 7. And it should be fun today because we're going to go over the best and worst movies of 2024. So I got to do some research. Hope to see you there. We'll see you in the next one.